intention of Natural Freedom League is to expand the understanding of natural law, which is based on objective morality, and to expose the illegitimacy of the belief in authority, and thus the inherent immorality of all government.
We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the
Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Natural Freedom League. I am John Rowland, doing business as John Rowland Wydogen. Here once again with my producer and co-host, Chill Will Keller.
What's
How
up,
you doing,
brother?
man?
It's good to be back.
Yeah, Will was in the process of a move recently, so he's up in his new studio now, so that's good. So we can get back to doing these interviews. And
Yeah,
today we've got an OG truther, Bob Tuskin. Hello, Bob.
How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Doing good, thank you.
Yeah, the OG.
It's the all-seeing eye of Bob Tuskin, ladies and gentlemen. Proof. You got it. I am in the Illuminati. There was all the proof you need.
Squash those rumors.
Let's just get it out of the way. Yes, folks, I am a shill. COINTELPRO, MK Ultra, all of the deceptive propaganda teams out there in the lamestream media. That's me. I'm guilty.
Well, we have a saying here that everyone is controlled opposition until no one is, so
Well, let's touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the problems with this, and I use this term very loosely, community, is this knee-jerk reaction to label somebody as a shill or COINTELPRO if somehow a portion of what they say, or even just one thing, we get really nitpicky with that shit. And I think that only feeds into the divide and conquer strategy, and the powers that shouldn't be know this. So they're constantly doing this, and we're victims of their control when we do this. And I see this on a regular basis, specifically amongst those that are free thinkers, that are aware, if you will, to a certain extent of what's going on. And not only do we do it to ourselves, but we also alienate others. And when we call them sheeple, which they are, let's be frank, they're stupid, they're brainwashed. There's no, but I love them. I love them. I care for them. I want them to eat. I don't want it so that when shit hits the fan, I see their children starving. That would kill me. It would absolutely kill everybody watching this right now if you have a conscience. If you see your neighbors starving, I don't give a shit how stupid they were, how many of them took the jab, how many of them thought 9/11 was fucking guys with box cutters. It doesn't matter to me. I love them. I care for them. And I don't want to see them go down with this dumpster fire that is our world today.
That's
Dude,
a good point.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Will.
that's a great point to jump it off, man, because we've been seeing this ramp up lately within, the so-called movements. And it's such a distraction and misdirection. People have to do their work within themselves, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to remain in the seeker archetype where we're constantly expanding our knowledge and deepening our understanding. And for that one goal, right? We know the one goal is that we're enslaved, and we need to work towards that. And these are all tactics that the social engineers know, like you said, and they implement, and they bet on that shit. So it's just it's fumbling within the community and anyone that's trying to get out publicly and talk about, you know, truth and information and what's going on.
I agree. I think this is going to be really crazy. I think we need to start hugging people. You know, let's just. I love the guys. David Rodriguez went out in Santa Cruz where everyone's fucking crazy over COVID. And even before COVID, I think the Love Police back in the day with Charlie Veach and some of these guys that in the face of so much darkness, they went out and they said, let's go give some free hugs. And I'm not a touchy guy. So for me, you know, it's I probably smell bad too. So, you know, I don't use that deodorant with the aluminum in it. So as a result, I might have some stinky pits. So my hugs might not be the greatest, but you know, the nature of what they're getting at I love it. You know, obviously, like so many of us, we go through this process as we're going down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and we see just the darkness. We realize, and I'm just going to get this out so we can just focus on some light. We realize that there are satanic megalomaniacs that rape infants and wish death upon us all, that are pulling strings and profiting and getting off literally on our demise. We come to this realization. All right, so we got that out of the way. Thanks for tuning in. That's enough fear porn. We all know that these guys are really that fucked up. You know, can I curse on this podcast, by the way?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Okay. Say what you want.
All right. So pedophiles, that they go after infants, okay? Infants. That's how fucking dark this shit is. We know that's the case. Now let's talk about what we do want to see, because we can choose not to live in that realm of reality. We can choose not to pass that on to generation after generation. The epigenetics does not have to go to our children and our children's children and so on and so forth. We can make that choice. That's the cool thing about all this, is we can sit around on a big fire and, you know, beat drums. And I'm not trying to be hippy dippy here or Pollyannish. I'm not trying to be naive to just how big of a hill we have to overcome. But ultimately, I want to eat good food. I want to listen to music. I want to have good friends. I want to tell jokes. I like to make people laugh. I want to have good sex with a good relationship, healthy relationships. I want family to be important. I want my child, my son, to live in a world where family is important. And I also want good, clean water. You know, I want shelter. What am I missing? You guys tell me, am I missing something?
No, you're right. I think, you know, really focusing on, you know, what you can control. You know, I mean, obviously we want to get out there. We want to spread the message as much as we can. We want to try to reach people, but ultimately, you know, what you can control, your local region, your family, making sure they're safe. Like that's the most, you know, the most change you can make is right there. Teaching your kids the right way, protecting your kids, protecting the kids in your community. Because I think part of the plot is to get us to think globally, right? Get us to think about these big problems, and that where do we get a solution for a big problem? Oh, we need government. We need government to solve these big problems. But if we focus more locally, that's where the real power lies. And I think that's a really good point that you make. I wanted to say too that you know, what you're talking about reminded me of a post I saw the other day by Hannah Maria. I don't know if you know who she is. She's from Europe. She lives in Spain, and she's been doing this work, you know, putting out videos, doing protests, things like that. She's been working with the police. She has a program called Police for Freedom. And Larkin,
isn't that a contradiction?
It is.
Isn't that an oxymoron? Isn't that like saying sovereign citizen?
It is. But she was making a good point that as much as she understands that order following is wrong, that, you know, it doesn't necessarily help us to judge every single police officer, as being, and looking at them as our enemy, because what it was the video of in Australia where they broke the line and they ran through all these cops. I don't know if you saw that. And she was saying, we shouldn't be, could be the worst thing for us, because this could just lead to them saying, oh, now we need to bring in the UN, we need to bring in the blue hats or whatever to so it furthers that agenda. So it was definitely a twist on sort of the philosophy of, order following is evil. Ultimately, we maybe need to look at those people and realize, hey, the doctors are following orders too. The nurses are following orders too. It's not just the police, and that we do have to reach out to those people. We do have to educate those people too, to really make a change.
There are so many order followers. I mean, if you have a job, which jobs suck, that's probably why most of us watching this right now, I hopefully are self-employed and trying to make Federal Reserve notes in a way that doesn't compromise your integrity and doesn't compromise your ability to kind of, do your own thing and not be a slave to somebody else making all the profits, which is not cool. But we're all following orders, even on a much more microscopic level within the family structure, where sometimes we have to give and take, and there's always going to be some level of that, no matter what we deal with. That's not an argument for what's the term, micro anarchy, minarchy,
minarchist.
Minarchist. That's not an argument for minarchy, but it's just it's pragmatic to understand that. And we have to be pragmatic as possible. That's my big thing with most of my activism, is to remain as pragmatic as possible and to pick and choose your battles. There's prominent folks out there that point to natural law and point to our rights and all of these things. And they've stated that if, for instance, a law enforcement officer, and I've been arrested, you can go and watch me showing people footage of Building 7. I've been there. But they and the officers were clearly violating natural law. Okay, there's no doubt about it. And would it be within my right to have taken up arms and protect myself in that instance? Possibly. I mean, if you really are going to the letter of the law, yes, you have a right to protect yourself. If somebody else is taking you captive, they're absolutely. We're not debating that. But what I am debating is whether or not it would be fruitful, pragmatic, and would it be utilitarian to, at that moment, for me to start shooting the cops that were trying to apprehend me, when I know that chances are this is going to be good publicity to show how corrupt these guys are. This isn't going to last long. This isn't going to take me away. And if I was to take up arms, what are they going to do? They're going to shoot me back. And then what sort of an impact have I had on things? And then what is my son going to do? And then what more? I wouldn't be doing this interview right now.
You'd be a martyr.
What would that do to get the folks out there that see, here's that crazy guy, Bob Tuskin, that natural law activist. He shot and killed the police. That's only going to further evangelize those against us, just like false flags do, even if it's legitimately, rightfully done. So I really urge folks out there to remain pragmatic, and I've heard some people, prominent people, state that they're going to take this extremist perspective because it's right within the definition of natural law. And I would urge the community to think twice about that. And I don't care if you call me a pussy, and I don't care if you call me a sellout. I think in the long run, that's the thing to do. That makes the most sense. You might not win the battle, but hopefully we're going to win the war.
Yeah. I think the social engineers, they want that to happen. They want that to get to that extreme level, that to give them the reason for civil unrest and for them to come in and do martial law, militarize the streets, and take activists out that stand under the truth. When the government says to not have human connection, you want to have human connection. This is the whole purpose of their doing, right? They're trying to atomize and separate people. So the whole hug thing, that's good, and using our voice is just as good as well. Going public. The order followers, like you said, Bob, they're everywhere. I mean, John and I live in California, and 99% of just regular people are order followers because they're promoting this agenda. So we need to reach out, go public, speak to our neighbors, have that one-on-one conversation with our neighbors, and try to reach them and engage in these conversations.
And listen, you can take a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink.
Right.
I had a neighbor that called the cops on me because I was safely shooting on my 5-acre homestead, and she was unreasonable. Let me tell that story real quick, because I think it speaks to this in a really good way. So this neighbor was tyranny. She was government in the capacity that she acted towards me. She was showing me that on such a grassroots level, tyranny and government exists with the neighbor. So we're talking about changing big institutions, changing, government. It starts with this neighbor. Okay, think about this. It starts with this woman who heard me shooting my guns next door, and in her mind, that's not allowed. So I called her after, and the video of the cops coming to my property is on my YouTube channel. So I called her, and to be neighborly, because I didn't really know the woman that well at the time, I tried to see what the issue was. I said, ma'am, is there a problem with you feeling unsafe? Because if so, I'd be happy to have you come over and show you the direction that I'm shooting, because I can understand guns are very dangerous. And if you feel unsafe about it, I want to show you that I'm shooting in a direction that's safe, that's not going to go into your yard somehow. Even though we're on 5 acres and it's the country, I went out of my way to try to appease her and make her feel comfortable with it. Not because I had to, but because I thought that was the neighborly thing to do. Her response: no, you're not allowed to shoot. I said, oh, okay. Is there a time of day maybe where the noise would be less of an offense to you? I know you maybe work at nights. I'm not sure what your job schedule is, but is there maybe a time of day where, I'm not disturbing you as much, or a day of the week? No, you can't shoot guns. I said, well, yeah, I can. If I have to invoke the law into this, yes, but forget the law. I'm not doing anything wrong, and I'm attempting to be neighborly here. And she just could not wrap her head around this, because she wanted to impose her will on others, and not chill will. It wasn't a chill will. Okay. It was a fucked up will. So she wanted to impose it on others, and there was no talking to her. And we're not going to connect with people like that. Maybe over time I planted a seed. Maybe my approach was probably better than telling her to just fuck off and being completely, indignant to it in the first place. But the moment I could not get her to drink the water. And she looked like a horse too. But that's a different story. Nice lady. Anyway, so what happened? Fast forward a couple years later, she leaves. She moves. She sells her property. The guy that moved in next door, he likes bushcraft. He's got chickens. He's ready. He's cool. He's excited about these things. He's on that level, and he might not know about what happened with 9/11, but at least I can relate to the guy. I got a cop, a retired sheriff's officer, who bought the property on the other side, the other parcel, And he's retired now, but on some level, he's cool too, believe it or not. And he clashed with the neighbor because she was trying to impose her will on others. And although this guy's was an order follower, to him, and at least as a retired sheriff, and remember back in the day, the sheriffs were supposed to be cool. They were supposed to be constitutional. I'm not saying that he is, because he definitely fought this fucked up war on drugs and definitely did all sorts of shit that is unexcusable. But ultimately now, all he cares about is his life, liberty, and happiness. That's all he cares about. And he doesn't care about what I'm doing on my property as long as it does not tread on what he wants. And that to me is cool. I don't care if he was a pig. I really don't. Okay. I really don't. In the back of my head, do I do things with a grain of salt with him? Sure. Yes. We're political with all sorts of people. But ultimately, does it bother me that he lives there as much as it did that woman? No. They're night and day. The guy who was a former sheriff's officer was not imposing his will on me. The guy who was a former sheriff's office is interested in protecting his property with guns, is interested in what ought to be anyone's prerogative to do so. That contrast there is interesting. And I think we see that in so many different walks of life, and so many different interactions. What my point was in saying that, I don't know. I'm rambling now. Bring me back, guys. What am I talking
Didn't you,
about?
I think I was checking out your YouTube channel, and didn't a cop come out because the lady called, but the cop was like sided with you? Is that how it ended up?
He was actually a cool cop. So interestingly enough, he sided with me. I ran into him later. He was thankful that I put the interaction on YouTube because it got a lot of good press for once for these guys. And I'm not an apologist for the police. Again, don't get me wrong, but it put some good press out there. And what's interesting is the bad press of them arresting me for showing Building 7 5 years ago now to people at the college campus on public property. The bad press they got, they didn't like. And interestingly enough, I ran into the same arresting officer years later at a school shooting drill that they were doing nearby. And he admitted that he was wrong. So if you want to see sort of an evolution, and again, this doesn't mean he's healed or cured, but he admitted he was wrong. And I think we need to hold these guys accountable and keep showing them the light, keep shining the light, because maybe one of these days, one of those guys will be your neighbor. And when shit hits the fan, and when we're all in the same boat, because at some point, the powers that shouldn't be, they look at these guys as dogs, right? They look at the guys, the order followers that wear the dog tags as dogs, as animals. They don't treat them any differently than you or I. They take advantage of them and put them against us in ways that's horrible. But at the end of the day, they're going to be hungry too. Going back to how we started things, they have kids that if they don't have food, they're going to be hungry.
Yeah. That's, I mean, the majority of people, we all have the same thing in common. And it's just the fundamental necessities of life, of being human. And, we need to keep that in mind when we communicate with people. Hannah Marie, her organization, Police for Freedom, it's a global organization, and she's doing really good work with that. She's actually reaching police. Police are quitting their jobs. She's reaching out to them and educating, and it's having some positive effects. And by no means am I, vouching for police, but what I'm saying is that they are human, and the potential to educate them and have some kind of effect is there, and should be progressed towards. as long and the doctors and the nurses, right, that are in these vaccine clinics. We need to communicate to everyone and bring it down to those fundamental necessities, like you were saying: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Are you guys single?
I am.
No, I'm not.
John, back in your day, if you were single and they told you had to get the jab in order to have a girlfriend, what would you do? For the rest of your life, you can't get any. I'm trying not to. I know there's women and I have respect for women. So I'm not trying to be too grotesque with this. But if for the rest of your life, you can never have an intimate relationship with a woman, or if you're into men, whatever, I don't give a shit. But the point being, if they say jab or no more intimacy, what do you do?
I wouldn't take it.
Are,
I don't
are we
think.
all monks? We're all nuns?
You see, in Oregon, they just said people who are fully vaccinated can kiss on dates now.
Really?
That was an actual news article.
Thank you, Oregon. That's good to know.
Man.
By the way, guys, can I do a quick plug? Is that okay?
Of course.
Go for it.
I've been doing different things to make Federal Reserve notes over the years to, be able to afford my property and, be where I want to be. And I see it as a means to an end, and we all have to utilize it. And my goal is to be completely self-reliant off the system. But practically speaking, again, I have to make Federal Reserve notes. So my most recent venture, for anybody listening who's interested, is selling unvaccinated sperm, 2 cups for $100. Ought to make some decent offspring. So if anybody out there is interested, visit www.bobtuskinsperm.com and you can get your delivery today.
Hey man, that's a phenomenal industry to be in now, because in a couple years from now, that shit's gonna skyrocket. Inflation, prices are gonna triple. Yeah,
I think
sperm.
I think that was
sperm.
I think that was what Jeffrey Epstein was talking about wanting to do, wasn't it?
Oh,
he said he
God.
wanted to repopulate the planet,
with his own sperm.
Yeah. That's, I mean,
those guys, they're egotists, they're narcissists, they're to think that they who the fuck wants a bunch of Jeffrey Epsteins walking around the planet? Who are you?
It's a God complex. For sure.
He knew what was coming. He was working with all these fools. He was working with Gates. I think this plan has obviously been in effect for generations. So I don't know, who knows? That again could be part of the psyop, sort of them just laughing at us. But apparently that is an actual quote from him, was that he wanted to repopulate the planet once it was depopulated. And there's another weird thing about him is so his dad was friends with Bill Barr, and or I think it was Bill Barr's dad got Jeffrey Epstein his first job as a professor. And Bill Barr's dad wrote a science fiction book about a future where the money was in like human trafficking of children. And it's just really weird. And then you've got,
He later went on to found the company Wayfair, from what I hear.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a connection.
For sure.
Oh man,
that's crazy. Well, I'm deeply concerned by these guys, these megalomaniacs that are out there. Interestingly enough, there are lower level guys that are just in it for money. And I know one of those guys. He's very, very wealthy, very well connected. And he, throughout COVID, has been looking to make money. And you know what, folks? We tend to make it sound more sexy than it really is. And with some of these guys, money is no longer a motivational factor. But for some of the guys, money is the factor. And by the way, my battery might die here on my computer. I'm seeing fuck. So I might have to figure out a part 2 of this interview.
Yeah,
How
that's
long?
cool.
Where are we at?
We're a half hour in.
Oh shit.
If it dies, I can piece it together
Okay.
if we have
Sorry.
to do a part two.
All right. So back to on that thought though. So this guy, he is currently on the board of a vaccine company that uses the older technology, not the mRNA technology. And it's, it's the science is still scary and there's still additives. And so it's no better. But the point is, he recently moved from New York City and Manhattan from his big penthouse to Palm Beach, Florida, because he did not want his children to have to get the vaccine in order to go to school, to one of their elite schools. So this guy who is on the board of a vaccine company doesn't want to vaccinate his own children, especially with this mRNA crazy new shit that they're doing with these vaccines and this push to get everyone vaccinated. And he's not alone. I think Steve Jobs, if you recall, he didn't let his kids have an iPad or watch TV or whatever it was. A lot of these folks, what's good for the goose is not good for the gander.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how there is this blatant hypocrisy in our world today. And these guys are, some of them just doing it to make money. Some of them are doing it for control and other reasons. And they would never do it to their own, because, geez, we're elite. We don't abide by the same rules. We go to the French Laundry and have a beautiful dinner with some of our closest friends in Napa
Lobbyists.
Valley.
They were lobbyists too.
And lobbyists, we go to the French Laundry. By the way, have you guys ever been in the French Laundry?
No.
Here
We
it's
live
nice.
out here.
I hear it's nice.
Yeah.
Shit, I'd go there.
Did you see
and
the mayor of San Francisco was caught in a club with her mask off, and they called her out on it, and she's like, "We're not interested in the fun police."
Oh my gosh.
Meanwhile, you can't go now into a restaurant, a gym out here without your vaccine passport or a test within 3 days. But she doesn't want to hear about the fun police.
Yeah, for those that don't know, I don't know if it was a national story or not, but Governor Newsom was seen at a very elite, fancy restaurant with many people not wearing a mask at a time where California was one of the most extreme, proponents of wearing a mask and all this other shit. So, it really goes to show you, again, it's just another example on a more minute level, perhaps, of the hypocrisy with these crazy people.
Yeah, rules for thee, not for me, right? That's their motto. I mean, you could see this everywhere, and it just it frustrates me that the average people just can't put those patterns together and recognize that. All the shit that the so-called conspiracy theorists were talking about, years ago, even last year, it's all come to fruition. We all see what's going on now. Here we are with the COVID pass. Can't go to a restaurant without showing your vaccine passport and all this shit. Not to mention what's going on in Australia is just mind blowing. But yeah, we're here at this point, the point that we all were talking about many years ago.
Not only that, people will defend him. I've had friends defend him. Oh, he apologized for that. I'm like, what, dude?
We're all human, right? We all make mistakes.
So crazy.
Yeah, it really is nuts. And Will, to speak to what you were just saying, it's bittersweet. I mean, it's just bitter. It's not even sweet. I wish the "I told you so's" were not flowing from my mouth. And on one hand, it's somewhat gratifying on a bizarre level to know that we weren't crazy, that this plan has been in place and is heading in this direction, and we could foresee it coming. So it brings a certain level of sanity, but I almost rather have been wrong about a lot of this stuff than to live in this world. I pinch myself sometimes and say, is this shit really happening? It is. And we saw the writing on the wall, and the creeping incrementalism did not trick us, so to speak. But it doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't make it any better. You know, being practical, I rather it not be going down. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I hope we can dial it back, and I hope we can do things. But ultimately, I'm focused on growing freedom in my own, microscopic world to the best of my ability, removing all of as much as possible, the reliance on these systems and this propaganda and everything else. And I have one foot in, one foot out, because like many of us, when it comes to some things, I play the game. I've been traveling for work. And when I fly from Florida to California, I wear a muzzle on my face. I'm picking and choosing my battles. I would absolutely find every possible loophole to avoid wearing that mask. If it was a vaccine, would I travel? No, that's where I draw the line. Okay. We all have to draw the line somewhere. And everyone has to make that choice for themselves. I know I have a radio show here in Florida. And every single night, this show has been becoming more and more aware of what's going on. This is on a major FM station. This is a huge radio station with a huge signal, a big audience. And I was a contributor. I did a segment on the afternoon show for many years. They called it Tuskin's Theories Tuesdays or whatever, shtick they had with it. And it was fun. I got to go on there, expose people to some radical ideas. And I had a good time for once, not preaching to the choir. And I love you, choir. Thanks everybody for listening. I love you guys, but I'm tired of preaching to you. I mean, how much you're probably tired of hearing it as well. It gets boring. So any chance I get to preach outside of the choir, to sing to others, I take. And this night show on this station, with COVID in particular, I've noticed a major awakening. I've noticed them pointing out things like, why is it vitamin D and zinc and all of these other things are not being promoted and propagandized? And something that's not really working, not really tested is. They're pointing out these contradictions in live time and realizing in live time what it used to take many years for people to wake up to. These guys are, to their credit, starting to see it in live time. And the co-host who's invited me on his podcast off the air, I don't know if they want me on the air. Oh, they let me call in, so I take that back. But the co-host was talking about how his best friend is getting married. And his best friend of 30 years wants him to be the best man at his wedding. And his wedding requires everyone to be vaccinated. The fuck is that? You're having a wedding and you're trying to tell people to be vaccinated in order to come. So this host, who's getting pressure from his best, not from the government, not from the CDC, not from the governor, but from his best friend, is giving him pressure to get vaccinated in order to be eligible to go to his wedding and be his best man. And he caved. He got the vaccine. He got the vaccine. So for him, that line was not drawn. And I personally, we were making a joke. If we never had girlfriends ever again, would you still get the vaccine? We'd all be, monks. I personally, when it comes to the vaccine, I just find it to be too much of an intrusion. When it comes to the mask, I won't wear a mask. When it comes to these things, we can all take a stand. But it's okay, folks. I forgive you if sometimes you play the game. I still love you. You're not less of a hardcore truther if sometimes you play the game. You're still cool with me. Don't worry. It's okay. I mean, it really is.
When you do it, you can just wear this shirt. Okay, see, government doesn't care about your health.
No.
Well, you know, I use the allegory from time to time that, you know, even Neo in the movie, Neo goes into the Matrix to affect change. And I think it's important to understand that, you know, like you said, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's a great time to focus on our own house and do the work, get our situation set up. They're obviously trying to do the divide, you know, in society. There's going to be the two societies, and we're going to have to know how to go into the matrix and find those loopholes and operate. But you know, great time to network. And you know, you said you have a farmstead or homestead.
Yeah, I got a homestead, and that's one of the things where if you are self-reliant, then you're not going to have to take the jab. Because, for instance, if you have a job that you're reliant on and you don't have the financial security, and not just finances, but the security of resources and abundance. If you don't have the abundance and you're dependent on a job, then it's tough. That's how they're co-opting all these people to comply. It's very tough. So removing those strings, and you might not get there today. It might take you some time. The sooner the better, obviously. But removing those strings of dependency on these different, you know, influences of control is really important. And I've been focused on that for as long as I can remember now. And I've been preaching this with Growing Freedom and this documentary that I need to put out one of these days, that I've been sitting on for probably 3 years because I've been preoccupied. You know, the homestead that I have, the 5 acres that I have, it's not much, but it's something. It's secure. It could provide me with food freedom. And you know what? You don't have to have 5 acres. You know, everybody can do it on their own level, and take baby steps. And don't worry if you're not where you want to be. Just take the baby steps. You'll get there eventually. Focus on the root of what you're trying to do, which is cut those strings, and go from there. That's all you can do. It really is. And stand up when you can, and figure out where your moral compass, you know, is at any given time with all of these issues. Is it immoral to get the vaccine? No, you didn't steal. You didn't do anything wrong per se. Is it defeating for your own self? Yeah, it sucks. And I feel bad for you. If you caved because you needed to do it for a job or for your best friend's wedding or whatever the reason is, that's demoralizing. That sucks. It really does. And you're not stealing from me, so you're not hurting me. So I don't, you know, at the end of the day, you're not violating any natural law or ethical code. But it's definitely not good. And you got to figure out sooner or later where you're going to draw the line, and keep in mind that they're going to keep moving I hate sport references, but they're going to keep moving. What is the flag? The goalpost. Yeah. You know, they're going to keep doing it. And, you know, if you make an exception here, then are you going to make an exception here? You know,
exactly.
I know this is a bit of a slippery slope, logical fallacy, perhaps, but it's something to consider. And it's something that we all think about.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. At one point, about a year ago, I asked a family member of mine, like, well, what is your line? You know, I said, what if they came to your door to take your kids? Like, would you stand up then? Like, you know, and it's what I've discovered with that family member is I don't think they have a line, in all honesty. I think they would go along with whatever, and they make those excuses like, well, you have to work. And they'll even ask me, well, what are you going to do when they force you to do it for your job. It's like, I'm not taking it, like that's my line. But this person who I love very much, but unfortunately I think they look at the world like these things you have to do. It's like how they say death and taxes, right? It's like, yeah, death is a reality, but are taxes like, do you have to pay taxes? Not necessarily. There may be consequences to that, but to compare it to death, I mean, it shows you how they try to make it seem like this supernatural entity that exists that is just a part of life. That's why people can't imagine a world without government.
I do death, I don't do taxes. And when I mean by I do death, I do ego death. Back in the day when I would drink ayahuasca and explore those sorts of things, and I haven't done that in a while. I'm more into micro dosing these days, but ego death was an interesting experience. So I do death. I don't fuck with taxes. Taxation's theft.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt.
That's a funny thing about that saying is I was like, yeah, well, taxes aren't, definite. But then I started thinking maybe death isn't definite either. The whole thing is we'll
find out sooner or later.
A fraud.
Yeah, man. So touch on real quick, Bob, if you will. You're the first person that I know that started the whole Building 7 on Facebook's new algorithm, where it seems like all the same people see these posts, right? That, I mean, what are they? Survey posts for data collection? It's weird.
It's data collection. It's fluff to try to just have more mind-numbing nonsense on your feed. It's clickbait. It's it's a whole plethora of things, and ultimately the internet in general is a double-edged sword. It has been a great tool for awakening in some respects, but in other respects, because it's so vast, it creates a lot of noise that gets in the way of finding real information, and especially when you have control over information from companies like Google, Facebook, and so on and so forth, where they can literally create algorithms to censor things where it's not blatant censorship, where it's, it's not the same censorship of old where, the TVs and stuff had stuff, but it's a more sinister censorship in a sense because it's more covert, it's not quite as blatantly happening, although to us it's quite apparent, or anyone who's paying the slightest bit of attention. So I noticed that with these stupid posts, what's the name of your childhood pet and the last thing you ate, and that's the name of your rock band, or whatever stupid shit it is that they post on these things. You've all seen them. I noticed that your comments on these posts gain a ton of views, that people see these comments not just on your friends list, but all these other people, especially if they have a lot of interaction on your comment in particular. So one day I was just tired of seeing it, and just my mindless response to whatever the question is, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not as far as I'm concerned, was Building 7, which it's just a smoking gun thing that people still to this day don't understand. And it's one of the most intuitive things to look at and see. You see this building 47 stories tall standing there, and you all know the story. And then it falls into its own footprint and free fall speed at 5 something in the afternoon. So it's pretty intuitive. And I wondered just maybe, if people start to see, mostly people on your list, the normies, if you will, on your list, your friends and family members or whoever you have, if there are any left that haven't blocked you already, they start to see Building 7 and all these posts. And it turns out that anecdotally, I have family members reaching out to me. I have all sorts of people that are not traditionally in the know talking to me about Building 7 suddenly. And I've encouraged all of the people out there to do the same thing. And now I'm getting reports back from other people who are just spamming Building 7 on these posts. that their friends are starting to see this, and people, it's kind of having, I mean, albeit minor, albeit not the most revolutionary thing. Listen, it's not the greatest thing. I'm not trying to get the Nobel Prize for putting Building 7 on fucking post, but it's having a cool effect. And I'm
Yeah.
probably going to get bored with it in a couple weeks, but for now, it's kind of cool.
It's funny. There's a guy that he always like agreed with me on conspiracy stuff, and he's been seeing me posting it, and he's like, this is lame. No one cares about Building 7 anymore. And I was like, well, bro, what are you waiting for the white hats to come save you? I was like, are you like, you're worried about Pizzagate? Like that's the whole thing about 9/11. Like all that stuff that comes after it, like even Julian Assange, he never releases anything about 9/11, right? It's all like other stuff that distracts you from this main thing that kicked it all off, And the fact that people don't focus on it, the fact that people don't know about Building 7, and I've called people out on that, and they actually don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, and you're gonna sit here and argue with me, and you don't even know what actually happened on that day? It's like, it's just crazy. So I think it's a great thing, man. I think it's great.
To all the woke truthers out there that are way more advanced than Building 7, and that's old news, and you're way more woke than I am. Cool, guys, I get it. Yeah, there's a lot more going on. I get it. It's just one thing. It's not the end all be all, and all the more power to you. But for those out there that haven't had a taste now, 20 years later, and when I would do the Building 7 challenge, which is the one I got arrested for 5 years ago, the premise of it, which again, I'm not looking for a Nobel Prize, was pretty simple. What we would do is we would take an unassuming person. We would not set it up, give them any context, anything that would distract them from strictly watching a video clip of a building, which was Building 7, but of a building that clearly falls into its own footprint in 6 seconds. And we would say, so describe to us what you see in this video. And the unassuming person inevitably, intuitively would say, that's a controlled demolition of sorts. That building's blowing up. It's controlled demolition. Most people would say there's explosives, or it's a building falling, and then so, well, how is this building falling? It's got to be some sort of detonation. And long story short, then you would do the reveal, right? You would say, well, did you know that building you just said was a controlled demolition fell on 9/11, wasn't hit by an airplane, yada, yada, yada. And some people would say, well, shit, I didn't know that. That's crazy. They would, light bulbs would go off. They'd be interested. Whether or not they followed up after that, that's on to them. And some people would have such cognitive dissonance, would be just so fucked up, where they just told me that it was a demolition, and the second I would say, oh, by the way, it's 9/11, boom, their program, it was like a trigger. Oh, what is this, a conspiracy? What the fuck are you trying to say? Like, what is this, some tinfoil hat shit, yada, yada, yada. But you just told me, you just said that was a demolition. Well, I don't know. I mean, cognitive dissonance is, it's a disease. It's a lot worse than COVID, folks.
Yeah, Agent Smith effect for sure. Dude, that's a creative tactic. And even the Building 7 on the social media, it's a creative seed. And it has an effect. And I think that's really important. People need to tap into their intuitive creativeness and think of just ideas and put them out there, do something different.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I after a while we get burnt out. Haven't done my show in years. It's fun to come on shows like this because it gives me a chance to kind of speak publicly about it. And it's a great way to vent and to, if anything, we do this show for ourselves. Back in the day, one of the reasons I did the show was because it's how I learn. So we all have our own learning styles. And one of the ways that I learn is through conversation and dialogue. So for me, what a badass excuse. I have a radio show. Come on my show. And I got to interview and talk and learn from people with all sorts of really cool information, and that was a really rewarding thing about doing these shows is, listen, I could invite anybody on, and it was very cool to get to learn in live time and then share it. And if people benefited from sharing it, great. That's just an added bonus. But ultimately, we're preaching in the choir with a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's been repeated many times over. And the ways to get outside of the choir, and, albeit those things are arguably minuscule, are important to me. And any chance I can get to exploit something that will hopefully wake up people beyond the bowel movement, I take.
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
That's great. Yeah, man. I hope you do get back to doing your show, because you're a real natural at it. I like the sense of humor that you bring. And I was watching your video where you talked to that cop, and it's a really good example of transmutation. You took that incident that happened to you, and you made it into a positive. And I think that's something we can all learn from, and we can all work towards. So real quick, I want to tell you something. I was thinking about doing this interview last night as I was cleaning toilets. I'm a night janitor. And
Nice.
This thing popped in my head. This is kind of stupid, but it's pretty interesting. The song 911 is a Joke by Public Enemy, right? What's the hook? Get up to get down, right? They built it to bring it down, right? 911 is Joke in your town. Get up to get down.
You think Public Enemy is in the Illuminati, dude?
No, but
is that predictive programming? Holy shit. I'm saying predictive program. Again, everyone's controlled opposition till no one is. Maybe someone came to them and said, "Hey man, make a song about 911 as a joke," but I'm saying, like, that lyric, that's pretty crazy. Get up to get down. That's what the towers were, right? I mean, they knew they were bringing them down when they built them. You know what I mean? We know Hollywood and the music industry has been co-opted. There's all sorts of programming. We know the prison industrial complex met with the gangster rappers of the mid to late 90s and convinced them to promote this war on drugs and some of these aberrant behaviors that led to mass incarceration of certain demographics.
Exactly.
We know that Lauryn Hill, for instance, was told that she needed to do music that was poppy and sexualized and fit a certain mold by Columbia Records. And of course, Columbia, the goddess of, there's some symbology there for sure. And I'm not naive to any of these symbols. There definitely is a lot to this. I've learned a lot over the years from folks like Freeman and others about all these symbols that are in plain sight right in front of us. And I love when, back Lauryn Hill, by the way, the Fugees are coming out with a new tour, supposedly. And she was great, man. She woke up, and they tried to give her a bad reputation, saying she went crazy, she hates white people, all this shit. But she really was great. She did an MTV Unplugged episode. And if you want some hardcore truth content, watch her MTV Unplugged, where they thought she was going to come and do all of her hits, her pop hits. And instead, she railed on the system with such passion and such truth. And God bless her, man. She killed it. Another example of that that I think is really cool. Most recently, I went back to watch Lupe Fiasco did a song called Words That Were Never Spoken. And this was probably 6 or 7 years ago now. And it was a mainstream song. It really reached a lot of people. And talking about Building 7, he mentions Building 7 in the song. He said, Building 7, 9/11, did they really pull it? You know, so this song was really ahead of its time in some respects and very awake. And if you watch the music video, they're all wearing masks in the video. And the mask in the video is symbolic of the words that were never spoken, of this media control and keeping people quiet and dumbed down and everything else. So these masks, there's been a lot of perhaps predictive programming on the mask. I've seen the dollar bill folded with the mask, where it looks like a mask.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's another example of my everyone is controlled opposition until no one is, because Lupe Fiasco didn't have to be in on it for them to put that imagery in there. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's got designers, that are like, hey, let's put masks on all of them. I'm not saying, it might have been his idea and it might be just a coincidence.
I think it was probably inadvertent that happened. I think he was going for a different symbology, but hindsight's 2020. And when you look at it today, it was compelling. So for him, I was thinking it was inadvertent because that song was just so awake to begin with. And after he put out that song, he was very popular. They blacklisted him. Yeah. He suffered.
That's a great song. I love that song.
Yeah, it's an oldie but goodie for sure. And I like all sorts of music, and I really appreciate music that's conscious. It's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards reggae music so much. It's because reggae music's super conscious. Those guys have been fighting against Babylon's system for a long time, and then it's part of their culture and truth and rights and roots and all that cool stuff. So I've always loved reggae music and had an affinity for it because of, that conscious element.
Another one, just real quick, because we're talking about it, the song Mask Off by Future. If you watch that video, everyone has masks on and shit too, same type of masks. But in the beginning of the video, there's a liquor store, and these three guys go in the store, and I think you hear like gunshots or whatever, and they come running out, and I'm telling you, the dude's running out with a pack of toilet paper. I swear, dude, that's what it looks like. It's real quick, it's real brief, but like it came out maybe 2 years before COVID, maybe 3 years before COVID. I was like, I don't know, man. Someone probably put that shit in there, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways,
programming is real.
To end the show, I want to plug my sperm, and I also have a toilet paper business as well, if anybody's interested.
They're doing that again out here. Costco is limiting what they're letting people buy out here. So they're,
I saw that.
Fake scarcity, Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, Bob. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you, brother.
Good to meet you. And always remember, put something good in the air and plant something good in the earth. Peace.
We be the natural freedom league, cause we become